Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com with how to build a really basic classical music library. Now, we've been talking about some keyboard works. I mean, yes, we have to do some piano stuff. And I know, and believe me, I've been there because this is how I came to it. Well, let me tell it to you this way. See, I didn't have any formal classical music training when I was growing up. I mean, I wanted to learn to play an instrument. I really did. But that didn't happen till much later, really till it was too late for me. Because my father, who I've talked about before, was a very fine pianist. I mean, he had the opportunity to get scholarships to like Juilliard, that good sort of thing. You know, he won piano competitions all over the place. He hated every minute of it. And my grandmother, who was a fabulous grandmother, but not so hot when in the motherhood department, just pushed him to practice to the point where he gave it up. And so when I was young and I was, musically inclined, he was not going to force me to play an instrument. He couldn't bring himself to do it. And when you're young, you got to be pushed. The question is, how do you push? You know what I mean? And what kind of kid you are and what else you like to do and all that stuff. And my mother, who was, a teacher and child psychologist, among other things, because that's what you have to do when you teach, she did not get in the way, which was probably a good thing. So by the time I finally got a chance to have piano lessons, which I did, and clarinet lessons, I mean, I wanted lessons. I wanted music somehow. But I never had the focus that was necessary to do anything good with it as a performer. But my dad was terrific. And so I had no encouragement to learn how to play an instrument. And as far as recordings went, my father would come to concerts like with me, and we did some things like as a family, and enjoy them. He enjoyed orchestral music, of course, but he would not, again, make the effort himself. It was all such a bad experience when he was young, and it's a sad thing, actually. It's a shame, and it happens to a lot of kids. I think they get pushed into it against their will, and they wind up fleeing as a result. Anyway, so he fled. That was the bottom line. So when I finally started listening to classical music, it was always to orchestral works. Big, juicy, yummy, wonderful orchestral works. And the idea of just listening to a solo piano for as long as you listen to an orchestral work, for me, it was a long time coming. Let's put it that way. I mean, I could listen to concertos. I could listen to solo works with orchestra. I like the sound of the piano, not so much the violin. But the piano was okay, but not by itself. And this is the first thing you need to understand when you listen to major classical piano works, is that the duration of the work, the size of the work in terms of duration, has nothing to do with the number of performers involved. A piano sonata is just as big, or potentially, not always, but potentially, just as big, just as long, just as complex, just as emotionally rich as a symphony. A symphony is a sonata for orchestra, for the full orchestra. So while you may enjoy the greater amplitude and coloristic range of the orchestra, you're not getting any less music, less great music, less affecting music when you listen to something for a solo instrument in our classical tradition. It's just a function of where the thing was used. Orchestras were big and expensive, and they had to be played in big halls. And usually, unless you were a very wealthy aristocrat with a palace that had an enormous ballroom, to stuff an orchestra into, you made music at home in smaller quarters, and that meant on a piano or with a few friends, a quartet, a violin and a piano, some arrangement of instruments. And that's what you did. You made music yourself. But the forms of the music, there's no difference whatsoever. So that's our first thing to keep in mind. I think once you get past that, it's like half the battle, because people expect that smaller forces be smaller things. But in music, that is not true. In classical music, that's particularly not true. So, having said that, We want to talk about Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Yes, the Moonlight, the first thing, everyone knows the first movement, but it's a sonata. It's a sonata meaning a usually a multi-movement or multi-sectional work. And it has several parts and follows a somehow evolutionary or varied emotional trajectory. This particular sonata has 3 movements. 3, count them. Beethoven actually called it a sonata quasi una fantasia, a sonata sort of like a fantasia or a fantasy. What's the difference? It doesn't matter. We don't care. You don't have to worry about it. If you're really, 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 really curious, the answer is basically that the sonata part, the movement in actual what they call sonata form, doesn't happen at the beginning. It happens at the end, which is quite unusual. So there's that element to it that gives it an element of what Beethoven would consider fantasy, meaning something free form. And it does have that quality to it. It really does. Now, the first movement is the Moonlight bit. Do, 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 bum, ba-dum, do, 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 do. You know, it does that. It does that endlessly. It does that for quite a while. So you want to get a performance. Oh, there's such a variety of how this is played. What's amazing about it, so amazing about Beethoven, is what he gets out of the simplest musical elements. I mean, really, the tune is 3 repeated notes in rhythm, bum, ba-dum, and underneath that you just have this rippling pattern. I don't know where the title Moonlight came from. It wasn't Beethoven's. It wasn't, and I've seen moonlight. I've seen moonlight on water. I've seen the moonlight reflecting on the still ripples of a pond. Doesn't sound anything like Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. You may think it does. I mean, there's some poetic association that somebody made, and it's stuck. It's stuck because, well, I mean, because it sells the product, right? I mean, nicknames really help. And so it really helps this one. So you've got the Moonlight bit, which is incredibly beautiful and which can go anywhere in performance from do 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 da ba da, which is rather perfunctory, to do 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 do, which is you'll be lucky to survive it at that speed. So when you're listening to these things, find a performance that has a tempo that suits you. It's rather cool. Well, see, you're in such a good position now because, you see, back in the old days, when you wanted the Moonlight Sonata, you had to go out and buy a record. And the record would usually have the Moonlight Sonata, the Pathetique Sonata, and the Appassionata Sonata. Usually those 3 came clumped together. Almost always as the essential Beethoven sonatas with nicknames that you simply had to have. And so you'd get all 3 of them. And I mean, it was nice. You have all 3 of them. But for our purposes, what we want to do, and I'm sure you'll agree, is digest these pieces one at a time, gradually, so that you can really internalize the music and enjoy it. And get to have a feel for it. And what you can do, rather than listening to 20, Beethoven wrote 32 piano sonatas, rather than listening to all of those all at once, the best thing to do is listen to different performances, because this is a movement, that Moonlight movement, because it's so simple, because everybody knows it, because it is nothing that you need to have any prior experience about. Just find one that you like. Listen to half a dozen different versions and listen to how different they all are. I mean, that's the essence, in a way, of classical music listening and building a classical music library, because you're probably going to want more than one performance, and you may enjoy more than one performance. So try that first movement and listen to a bunch of them and see which one you really enjoy. Now, there are, as I said, 3 movements. The second movement is, it's almost like it's a little dance. It's a minuet type thing. It's charming, and its purpose is to wake us up for the finale. This is an interesting piece because it steadily accelerates and gains in intensity and volume and speed. So it's a moderately paced, brief movement. And then the finale. Ooh, the finale. It's so cool. People don't listen to the finale. They should. I mean, it's much more exciting. Well, it's the most exciting thing in the entire sonata. But, I always listened, when I finally heard the whole thing, I was like, wow, who cares about Moonlight? I mean, listen to that finale. Whoa, it's a humdinger. It's a big, tempestuous, passionate keyboard exordium with fabulous tunes. Bang, bang. Marvelous. Marvelous with a gorgeously windswept second theme. Da 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 da. Never mind me. But it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible, and you are going to love it. I mean, really love it. And once you hear the whole piece, the Moonlight opening has an entirely different emotional feel to it when heard in retrospect. Because, when you listen to it all by itself, it's just this sort of quiet, puddly, moon on a puddle, sort of, preludial thing. It's nice. It's very beautiful. It's very poetic. And it's, then you get to the finale. And all of a sudden you think back on it and you realize what a distance you've come, that you've been on a journey. You really have. The journey began with that lovely poetic image, but ended up in a fiery burst of violent fury and energy. And oh my gosh, it's just terrific. And it's the whole package that Beethoven wants us to hear. And it's the whole package that gives us this unbelievable feeling of satisfaction. I mean, the Moonlight part will make you relaxed. It might make you feel nice and tranquil and mellow and all that, but the whole sonata, that makes you feel like you're alive. And being alive is really where it's at. I'm telling you. So give it a listen that way. Try it that way. See what you think. Experiment with different performances. Because there's just a huge range that you're going to hear. And I think you'll be very, very happy. As usual, if you want to find recording recommendations, you can check out the reviews at classicstoday.com. I'll post a link to something down below that I may have done, or I think I did. Well, we'll see. You'll see. You'll check out the link below for another video, and you'll get a sense of what some of your options are. But like I said, in these days with downloadable options and streaming and all that stuff, it's all at your fingertips. You can do it any way that you like. So do it that way. Do it the way that you like. And you'll know that you're doing it the right way if you find the music fascinating and marvelous and want to listen to it more than once. I mean, that's the whole concept, right? So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.